let's pivot and actually talk a little bit more about the situation. I always say the conversation I did with Murtaza Hussain is a really good primer. But in Kashmir, a couple of weeks ago, the Indian government scrapped the Indian constitution, deployed troops there, deployed even more forces. The internet is still off. There's no means to communicate externally. This is an ongoing act of escalated repression. It always was a repressed region. And this is also in the context of ongoing heightened tensions with the Pakistani government. Imran Khan has compared Narendra Modi to Hitler. I don't go for the Hitler comparisons for obvious reasons, but I have to say, like, the Pakistanis are incredibly legitimate grounds to talk about the extremism and the danger of this Indian government. And that obviously comes from an incredibly dysfunctional and dangerous Pakistani system, which has sowed any number of incredible problems. So this really is a context where, you have two nuclear powers. You have a lot of geographic, historical, memory, complexity, identification. You've had Indian governments going back well into the past, just like Pakistani governments who have engaged in atrocities and seriously escalated tensions. But again, this Narendra Modi BJP government is a departure and an escalation. You have to recognize that. There is not a baseline. Manmohan Singh, I believe, was the prime minister during those atrocities in 2008. And I got to tell you, just as any other place, and we all know this, this is what makes the Pakistani blood boil. Their people are murdered by U.S. drones, by Indian forces in certain cases. If you saw that operation coming out of Pakistan, you were an Indian citizen, just in the same way, if you saw your friend shot, you might want to go and do something about it, right? It took, for all of the dysfunction, a Congress party government to not escalate what could have been a global catastrophe then. I don't know where the circuit breakers are now. And in fact, I think in this current context, there's a bit more circuit breaking maybe on the Pakistani side. But at the end of the day, the intelligence services, the Pakistani military are going to have a lot more weight in what ultimately happens. And if they perceive an encroachment on what they consider to be some of their sort of strategic depth on India, that could be truly catastrophic. But let's really focus now also on what already is catastrophic, and this is the people of Kashmir. We're going to play a bit of a report from the Real News Network on the latest Indian moves.
Because of India's decision to revoke Kashmir's political autonomy. On Monday, the Indian government, under the Hindu nationalist Prime Minister Narendra Modi, revoked Article 370 of India's constitution. That article had provided a degree of autonomy for Kashmir, which is India's only Muslim-majority region ever since Pakistan split from India in 1948. Here's a clip from the parliamentary debate in India when Article 370 was revoked.
Under powers vested in the Constitution, the President of India, in consultation with the Parliament, announces that patch all the sections of Article 370 cease to hold good.
The government's decision will not lead to integration but disintegration of the region and its people. You can't force people to be part of a country. This needs to happen with the consent and the will of the people. This is wrong. This is a mockery of laws.
Shortly before the revocation of Kashmir's autonomy, the Modi government cut the territory off from all phone and internet connections and deployed thousands of troops to Kashmir. Also, Indian troops have been repressing protests in Kashmir, and as many as 500 people have been arrested in nighttime raids, according to reports that have gotten out. When Modi ran for re-election in May of this year, he had campaigned on the promise of revoking Kashmir's independence, arguing that doing so would allow India to halt terrorism and separatism. Pakistan, though, which controls the northern half of Kashmir, responded by expelling India's ambassador and suspending bilateral trade. Pakistan also warned that the situation could deteriorate into war because of Pakistan's commitment to Kashmir, which it believes should belong to Pakistan. Pakistan's Prime Minister, Imran Khan, said the following to Pakistan's parliament shortly after Kashmir's autonomy was revoked.
ये जो कल इन्होंने किया है ये कोई एकदम प्लान करके नहीं किया ये इनके इलेक्शन का मैनिफेस्टो था
This is not a decision the BJP have taken out of the blue. It was part of their election manifesto all along. It is, in fact, ingrained in their ideology to put Hindus above all other religions and seeks to establish a state that represses all other religious groups.
Now, that's absolutely true. And there's no doubt about it. And that would, unfortunately, would parallel the nature of Pakistani governance that was definitely significantly escalated under the Zia-ul-Haq dictatorship of the 80s, where there are blasphemy laws that are incredibly repressive. There's discrimination against religious and minorities, including Muslim ones. And there's been sort of somewhat of a Sadaization, though not entirely, of Pakistan. It's still a very pluralistic, diverse country in many respects. India had serious ethnic conflict. After Indira Gandhi was assassinated, that Congress Party government looked the other way while Sikhs were massacred across the country. So there is no record here or government or party to idealize. However, again, there is a narrow-white tradition that is being destroyed here that really did manage on some level to preserve a certain democratic pluralism in India. It failed on, successfully on things like inequality, on social delivery, with the exception of some incredible states like Kashmir that were run by communists and socialists that actually did incredible programs and things like public health. But you can't, I think it's especially important right now. The retreat of the global, of the neoliberal part of the global elite, they just want to go back to the 1990s. They are the global version of Joe Biden. And that's never going to work. We are in a different historical phase. We need to defeat the global fascist, the global authoritarian threat. And it's a dialectic because you can't attempt to go back to sleep and try to recreate things as they were. We're not going back to Manmohan Singh time. We're not going back. At the same time, it's very naive and just inaccurate to not note the real distinctions here. Kashmir is a really painful, brutal version of that. People who have known and have discussed this issue have centered Kashmir as a site of occupation and military abuse for generations. And it is, and it was, and that was under successive Indian governments of all political persuasions. And this is a significant escalation. And so we need to be able to hold the reality of that tension in quite a few situations, and certainly in Kashmir. You've just watched a Michael Brooks show video, and you can watch all of our full main live shows every Tuesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and subscribe to get all of the clips you want. We're covering the globe. We're focusing on international relations, the intellectual dark web. We're having fun. We're doing deep dives with a lot of amazing guests. Of course, become a patron for the whole thing at patreon.com/TMBS, or subscribe to this YouTube channel and help us keep growing and get that content out there. Subscribe below.